first time we had an agreement among all countries in the world who committed to this wide-ranging agenda on sustainable development, and therefore that the only way to get anything done in this very complex and um, a multifaceted world full of challenges and different views and perspectives was through collaboration, partnership, and ultimately on a voluntary basis rather than something that was dictated in a more sort of mandated and legislated form. So we've got these goals, we've got this framework, and yesterday I actually had the opportunity to speak to one of our honorary professors at the University of Warwick, who was also based at Monash, and he was involved in drafting the UN SDGs. And I sort of asked him to take stock after 5-6 years now, asking him, so where do you think, what's your assessment? How have we made any progress? And he said, yes and no. It's a very sort of double-sided, two-sided picture, and to the extent that certainly the current pandemic has led to a lot of sort of regression in many areas on health and education, no doubt, but also economically speaking. So there's huge challenges, and if 5 years ago we thought we were having an ambitious agenda, that's still the case today. But at the same time, he was quite optimistic and upbeat, particularly about the role of developing countries who really taken to this agenda in many cases and have really tried to work with it. But also perhaps intriguingly, the fact that the private sector, companies, have more and more in recent years started to step up to using and looking at the UN SDGs as an interesting framework that's ultimately supported by a wide range of actors, scientists, governments, and the civil sector. And so he sort of thought that there were certainly some early stages of perhaps being a bit more optimistic, but the fact of the matter is the task remains challenging. We have a lot of issues in the world that certainly need to be addressed, climate change, no doubt, as well as many other social and environmental issues. Interesting also, I asked him whether he could think of anything that wasn't included in this initial framework, and he specifically mentioned culture. He felt that culture was sort of pushed to the sideline and was sort of degraded in many ways, didn't make the cut into this wide range of lists. And he thought that actually culture may be an important linchpin, an important leverage point for people to get together. And I mentioned that because I know that obviously City of Coventry is, city of culture, and therefore there may be opportunities for us all to think collectively about how business, how local and regional government, private sector, civil sector, and universities can work together through perhaps the means and opportunities that this City of Culture might offer. So this is something that's sort of work in progress, but I'd just like to say watch this space because we do believe more on this will be coming forward. Now, obviously, many of you will be joining us here from the private sector, working in business, small or medium sized to some extent. And you will ask yourself, okay, so this agenda looks broad, looks ambitious, looks relevant from as far as we can tell, but what's our role? How should we be thinking about these UN SDGs? And it is important to mention that right from the outset, there was a clear recognition that governments on their own were not going to be able to achieve any of these goals and achieve the agenda. There was a clear case to be made for companies to be involved in not only in the development of those goals, but fundamentally also in the implementation. Not least because many governments, as we now will probably see even more so in the years to come, are really strapped for cash, for resources, for the finances, and therefore they really depend in many ways, whether they like it or not, on implementation and support from the private sector. And so specifically, goal number 17, therefore, really provides an angle and opportunity for companies to think about where do they fit in, what kinds of partnerships might they want to develop with different types of actors across the range, across the region or the country and the nation and globally, and really try and contribute to this wider agenda. There are various reports, mostly sort of focusing at the higher level, at the global level and the multinationals. But I think this idea of the partnerships being so fundamental, the collaborative element to the achievement of the UN SDGs is still absolutely critical. Now, people may then have asked, okay, this again sounds nice and fine, but can you tell me something a bit more tangible, something where I can get my teeth into? And so economists went out and started to look across the UN SDGs, try to get a sense of the economic opportunity involved in that. And one of the earliest reports by the Business and Sustainable Development Commission in 2017 then came forward with a report and significant numbers suggesting that achieving these goals could create 380 million jobs around the world and unlock at least $12 trillion of business opportunities. So for anyone with a very commercial mindset, those numbers, at least in the global bigger picture, looked healthy and interesting. And what's more, as you can sort of see, this report also almost in many ways argued that if you're in business, if you're looking towards the future, if you're unsure as to how to position your company and where to look for new demand and new opportunities, people said the SDGs are effectively the world's biggest crowdsourced order book from the future. You know, these are the key areas where we do know that population growth, climate change, urbanization will drive demand in a variety of ways and angles. And so this report provided us with 60 hotspots that were predicted to grow faster than the rest of the economy. Now, this report is now a few years old and certainly preceded the pandemic, but I think if you look across these areas of health and well-being and cities and energy, none of those should come as great surprises, but it's worth sort of digging into these hotspots a bit more, perhaps, if you're interested to find out where exactly your company might fit in with those. Then the next sort of challenge for most businesses is to ask themselves, okay, how do we sell this internally to our owners, investors, to our directors, to our employees and managers? And typically this then requires this sort of approach of developing a business case. Now there are two sides to the business case. One is the more sort of pessimistic, the reactive response and saying, look, we've got these SDGs out there. They're probably important. We need to be aware of them because they tell us something about certain types of risks: economic risks, social risks, environmental risks, technological risks, political risks, you name it. Really, sort of the wide range of issues that may come to hit the company at sooner or later. And therefore, this is sort of a very defensive approach towards saying, well, even if we don't necessarily buy into the agenda, we need to be paying attention in order to protect ourselves, to ensure that we are aware of certain trends and issues and developments around the world and locally and nationally, no doubt, that may have an impact on our bottom line in some form or another. But there are also certainly, obviously, wider trends around changes in the workforce, changes, no doubt, in the way which we work, expectations on business, expectations from millennials and new generations joining the workforce and their attitudes and approaches towards what they expect from business, as well as sort of media risks and simply being sort of shown the limits of business as usual as we've experienced in the past. But if you sort of brush that to the side, I think it is much more important to focus also on the positives, if you like, the opportunities from engaging with the SDGs. And certainly the previous slide should have given you a bit of a global or macro perspective on where those future business opportunities lie and why the SDGs are important in that regard. You may already be doing something on sustainability in your business, or you may have some thoughts about this, and the SDGs therefore allow you to sort of draw on what is now a very widely used, a common language and a shared purpose to connect with that and say, well, maybe as a company we have something to contribute to that. Maybe we can do, we are already doing things, or we could be doing more. And in doing so, we recognize that we are in some form contributing to the SDGs in a more meaningful way by connecting with various types of stakeholders, policymakers, contributing to the general stability of our societies and markets in a way that's certainly felt somewhat shattered, and there was certainly a lot of lack of trust as well amongst consumers and customers in the world of business. So these are sort of some of the terms, some of the expressions you might want to use and draw on, as well as sometimes the more direct effects of lowering costs from more efficient resource use that may be a direct result of engaging with key issues on waste and pollution and energy. Another report that you might want to take a look at is the SDG Index report from 2019. And what they did in this report was to say, well, we know this agenda is broad. There are 17 goals, but how can companies, can industries or governments focus on something that's perhaps a bit more tangible, a bit more well packaged? And so in this report, they suggest these themes, if you like, 6 SDG transformations that I've shown here. And again, there's a lot more detail here in this report than I can obviously convey in this short space of time. But what it does show is that there are certain themes that are connected together. And that's ultimately something that's very important to bear in mind, that these SDGs are not 17 different issues. They're ultimately closely interconnected. Sometimes they're clear positive effects where addressing one thing also has positive co-benefits or spillover effects onto the other goals. Sometimes there are tensions and trade-offs. Simply being aware of those is important as a first step, but therefore also some of these themes, these broader transformations may allow you to think about how you and your company and your business models, your products and your service can contribute to a much wider range of impact across the board. And fundamentally, I think what we're sort of seeing is that throughout time, we increasingly understand as academics, but also I'm speaking to a lot of non-profits and business representatives and managers, that there's certainly sort of a shift going on in the world of business about how we perceive and how we understand the role of business within society, really moving away from a sort of disjointed perspective where you have business on the one hand, society somewhere else, and nature is just out there for the taking, so to speak, or as a waste dump, towards looking at something where, okay, there are opportunities for win-win sort of outcomes and win-win scenarios. And finally, I think in the more recent dates, years and days, something where companies really understand that their contribution really exists in supporting society, leveraging nature, and but also ensuring that we have stable operating system in place that allow us to continue with our business. So it's almost a sort of shift in perspective as to what we value and how we value the contribution that business can ultimately make, not just to society, to our economies, but also to our individual lives and well-being. Again, I'm sort of skimming through a lot of different types of ideas and resources and materials, and as I said, the slides will be available. There's also follow-up references and sources that you may want to take a look at in your own time. One thing that I always like to draw attention to is this figure from the UN Global Compact, which tried to really demonstrate that whereas in the past, many companies would look and treat SDGs and sustainability as something that can sit on the outside, maybe a dedicated team or an individual who had some responsibility for these issues. But increasingly, we know and understand that unless companies really start to think about these issues right from the top, from the top of their existence, if you like, thinking about what is the purpose of their business, how does the organization contribute to these different goals and issues, then most of these other efforts to respond to the SDGs are most likely going to be ineffective or inefficient. You may run the risk of being labeled or someone who's greenwashing or SDG washing, as it would be called in this context. So only really a sincere strategic effort to embed these issues right from the top of the organization through your forms of governance, through the strategy, is going to lead to something that contributes not just to the SDGs, but also to the bottom line, to the business success. Otherwise, it just really ends up leading to all types of forms of miscommunication. People don't really understand why we're doing this here on the SDGs, but at the same time, we're still selling X in a different kind of format. It really you have to really think about how your products and services contribute, and therefore, in doing so, you would hope that this will also lead to business success sooner or later. Again, more practically speaking, companies and managers and my new students would ask me, is there anything else we could do, or how do we, if we accept some of the things you've just said to us, what else can we do? How can we integrate the SDGs and sustainability issues? And again, I would refer them to a report and a document called the SDG Compass Guide, and that sort of really takes you step by step through a very simplistic model, if you like. It's really business common sense. You plan, you do, you check, and you act and react, if you like. But it's certainly applicable to this sort of a world of the SDGs and integration. And by looking at your priorities, by looking at what kinds of goals you're setting yourselves, how you integrate them into the business, and fundamentally how you then report it and communicate it to external stakeholders, to the investors and owners, as well as internally to your employees and suppliers and many others. All of that helps you to achieve a much greater integration that is strategic rather than sort of added on the sidelines. And as with the previous slide showed, fundamentally, this makes most sense if you've really thought carefully about what is the purpose of our business, what are we trying to achieve, maybe where should we be by a certain point in time, and how do we get there. So I'll briefly dip into some of the elements of that, or some ideas, tools that you might find useful. Value chain mapping, for instance, is one example where you start to look at the entire value chain, the entire supply chain, as well as what happens to your products and services once they're being passed on to customers and consumers towards the end of life, even beyond that. And think at every stage of your value chain, where might there be opportunities for us to have a positive impact on specific SDGs, and where do we need to reduce our negative impacts because of the risks and other challenges that this might pose. So you would really sort of think about this in the context of your own company and the different ways of doing this in a more rigorous or less rigorous way. What we find, or what research is showing, is that most companies tend to focus in the first instance on the negative elements rather than looking at the upside to say, well, there's some of these goals we actually can have a much greater impact, a more positive impact, if we really think about this carefully, if we package it in a way that is strategic, that explains to our customers, to our employees and others why we're doing this. So really looking at both sides is important. And then secondly, also not just looking at the company's own operations, but as this value chain map explains and illustrates, really looking across the entire value chain, from the supply chain, the sourcing, as well as pushing it out to customers and consumers. And finally, this is a very linear representation, and most of you who are familiar with the concept of the circular economy would know that ideally we're looking towards something that is much more circular in nature, where you're really thinking about a loop rather than this linear production chain. Other pieces of advice that you may want to take into account are specific goals that the UN Global Compact here are recommending, and these are very black and white in many ways, types of goals and levels of ambition that companies can work towards, that are integrated and based on the SDGs, and where you can think about, okay, to what extent do we have an answer to those? Are we already on course towards meeting those? How do we get there? And therefore, again, the challenges are enormous for many companies, particularly depending on the types of resources that you have available. But thinking carefully about who you may be able to partner with in order to get towards achieving those goals, that's likely going to help you to sort of stimulate innovation and creativity, entrepreneurial thinking. All of those, I think, are particularly important in this current world that we're living in, where we're really looking to figure out ways to achieve lots of different issues all at the same time. There's lots more tools, more concepts available. Again, I'm sort of listing some of them here to give you a bit of a flavor. Depending on how familiar you are with them, you can sort of read up on them. There's lots of good books and websites available. People like myself, obviously fairly well embedded in this field. We get websites and newsletters all day long, and it's almost difficult to keep track of all of it. But there are some websites that you may want to go through, such as the Shift Tools or the Embedding Project, which try to aggregate all the help that's already freely available out there on the internet that you can use, that may be able to provide you with some answers to the questions and challenges that you face in this context of the UN SDGs. Something else that I would also recommend perhaps is to think about something called a logic model. This is in sort of a fairly basic step-by-step guide, as you've seen represented here by these boxes. And fundamentally what it asks you is to think about what are some of the key things that we do have, key inputs or resources. What are some of the key activities that we do through our core not just the core values, but the core competencies, the activities, our practices within the business, our business models. And you think about how do these combine towards something that can be measured, something that can actively lead to maybe a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, an improvement in gender diversity, whatever it might be, depending on the different types of SDGs. But this type of sort of logically thinking about the combination of what you have available and how you put them together can help you plan your engagement and implementation over time. Again, I'm not exactly doing these types of frameworks a lot of justice here in this short space of time, but I just want to throw it out there for you to perhaps read up in your own time or go back to us if you have questions. And similarly, I think a final example would be to say, do also take time to take a step back and say, where do we want to be? You know, the Agenda 2030, for instance, is a great framework. You ask yourself, by 2030, where do we want to be? How do we define success for ourselves as a company? And how do we get there? So rather than sort of being locked into the present, you project yourself straight into the future and say, what would be an ideal outcome? And then retrace your steps. What are some of the key changes you might need to make to your business model, to your products and your services, and therefore really sort of engage in something that is a bit more detached from the current constraints. And most of us will struggle to look ahead into the next few days at the moment, let alone something as far ahead as 2030. But it is important. Some of the biggest, most world's renowned entrepreneurs use this sort of visualization of an ideal outcome, the future, to capture the imagination of the employees, of investors, of the wider community. And if you can do the same thing, even towards a small scale, maybe that is the sort of the ability to unleash. That gives you the ability to unleash creativity and new ways of thinking that will help us escape from the sort of business as usual processes that have led to many of the other challenges. So it has to be rigorous. You should draw on resources and materials that are available, but do take that moment to reflect, if you like, on what an ideal outcome of a future might be. And there's no guarantee that you'll get there, but it certainly will give you an opportunity to think very differently about your business and your business model. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of a lot of different issues, lots of different tools and ideas and concepts you might want to think about. I just like to sort of end with an observation, and I think we've really seen that shift in perspective and shift in perception as to what we think companies are doing, what it means to be performing well, what is success in this current space of time. And as you can see, I think companies, particularly large and multinational companies, are really moving away from this sort of more 20th century perspective that it was a competition, a zero-sum game, towards deciding how can we represent and sort of speak to the world and demonstrate that there's a good reason for our existence, that we are as a result of our products, our service, our business model, the way we work, not just internally, but with the entire supply chain and value chain, that the world really derives benefits in a variety of ways. Some of them are obviously economic, but some of them are also social and environmental. And then that's a different way of looking at the role of business, but certainly one where I see a lot of demand, a lot of attention from policymakers, from NGOs and others, and civil society, arguably, that is demanding a change of why do we have companies, and can they do something that governments certainly could not do on their own? So hopefully some food for thought, but as I said, there's plenty more information available, and I look forward to your questions, comments, observations, and resources will be available here at the end of this slide deck as well, which we'll share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fred. That's wonderful for a really informative presentation. We'll do Q&As after the second speaker. So can I invite Sarah Ballinger now, who's going to be presenting on why businesses are going green, to show us some case studies and examples. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Denise.
Hi.
Just share my screen 1 second. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. One second, sorry. Yep. So hi everyone. So I am Sarah Ballinger, one of the energy advisors on the Green Business Programme. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the support available to businesses through the Green Business Programme. And also give an overview of some case studies of businesses that we have helped. Can't get on. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the Green Business Programme is an ERDF funded programme that assists with helping Coventry, Warwickshire businesses, so SMEs in particular, go green. So we have energy and resource efficiency grants available, energy and resource efficiency audits as well. We also have the Green Business Network, so webinars such as today facilitated by the Green Business Network, and we have lots of webinars throughout the year, and as and when we can, we do face-to-face kind of networking events as well. So we're currently in phase 2 of the programme, which began 2019, and we recently had confirmation that we've got an additional £1 million of funding to assist businesses, and also £118,000 in revenue grants. I think Denise is going to give a bit of an overview later of how we partner with Coventry University Enterprises, but just to let you know, there is additional support through the university as well. So the grants more specifically, so they are capital grants to improve energy and resource efficiency. The grants have to be a minimum of £1,000 and up to £50,000, that's the maximum grant. They are 40% intervention rate, so we put 40% towards the project, and then the company needs to match that with 60%. We have to have a carbon saving from the project, so it must save at least 1 tonne per £1,000 worth of grant that we provide. The different measures that we support, so we don't have an exhaustive list, but anything that will save energy and carbon, basically. Typically, this includes LED lighting, heating measures, equipment such as new compressors. We have also looked at resource efficiency measures, so we've assisted with recycling and waste improvements as well. So it's not just energy efficiency measures that we focus on. We also support businesses through free resource and efficiency audits. So at the moment, we're doing that remotely, and we gather as much information as possible from the business remotely. So we ask for lots of photos, bills, and then we'll follow that up with a video call or phone call just to get as much information as possible about the building and how the business operates as well. And we follow that up with a report. So we make recommendations. Where possible, we estimate the capital costs of putting the measures in place, and also calculate payback periods on investment. We do look at no cost measures as well, which at the moment might be of particular interest for businesses if they haven't got the money upfront to invest in measures. So now I'm going to just go through a few case studies of businesses that we've helped. So first being Sargentons Industries. So we've actually helped this business. We first met them in 2016. So they've had a phase 1 and a phase 2 grant. They are an aluminium die casting company based in Coventry, and more recently they're looking at diversifying what they do for as a business case. So more and more they're looking at lightweighting solutions for electric vehicle applications, and last year they partnered with Chargy to supply charging points on lampposts for on-street charging. So they are diversifying in the low carbon economy as well, not just doing the die casting that they've traditionally done. So in phase 1, we assisted them with a capital grant. So they invested over 130k in LED lighting, power factor correction, compressor, amongst other measures as well. We assisted with a £26,000 grant, and they saved 335 tonnes per year. on their carbon footprint. And last year we approved an additional grant. So this was a 50k grant looking at decoring machinery. So the existing process for decoring used over £106,000 per year in gas, and then the new process will only use £13,000 in electricity instead. So they're looking at different ways of producing the same products they've always done, but using much less energy. And there's a massive carbon saving from this, which was 525 tonnes per year. So Sargentons really see the benefits of embedding sustainability within their business. This is a list that they have produced. As you can see, things such as brand image, increased competitive advantage, increased productivity, reduced costs, better financial investment opportunities. So more and more up the chain. So they work with a lot of car companies. So there's pressure from them from those larger companies. They're asking, what are you doing in terms of sustainability? So Sargentons want to be ahead of the curve and kind of do what they can early on. Increased preparedness for future legislation and costs. So energy unit costs, as well as additional costs such as climate change levy, these are all increasing year on year, and they want to be more resilient. And also with their staff as well, so they see improved recruitment and retention of quality employees, and also just a better work environment for employees. So things such as the LED lighting just makes it a nicer environment to work in. So the next company, Data Graphics. So they are a document automation company based in Rugby. We have just approved a 30k energy efficiency grant for the company. They are looking to install a 265 kilowatt solar PV array at their site in Rugby. So this will save 60 tonnes of carbon per year and 24,000 in electricity costs. So big saving to the company. And again, all those benefits before, making them more resilient to future price increases and improving their reputation, etc. They have done lots of other measures to improve their sustainability performance as well. So we helped this business, so they only just put in the application this year, but for a few years, they've been looking at lots of different measures to embed sustainability, from procurement practices, recycling facilities. They've already invested heavily in energy efficiency measures and lighting, etc. They like to involve the staff and have environmental action days, and staff can make suggestions on ways to improve environmental performance. They are also a climate aware company, so they invest in offsetting carbon emissions. So they've done what they can in reducing emissions on site, but they see the importance of offsetting emissions as well. And they do have an aspiration to be carbon neutral. So just quickly, a quote from the company. So sustainability is at boardroom level within Data Graphic. The future of our planet depends on it. You simply have to do the right thing. We are also starting to see the benefits of being green when it comes to winning new business. There appears to be a positive shift within the business world towards sustainability and the planet. And then finally, so 3P Innovation, they are a world-class engineering and process automation company in Warwick. We assisted this company in phase 1 of the programme with a 69,000 energy efficiency grant. We assisted them with LED lighting throughout the building, more efficient heating system, air conditioning system, which saved a lot of energy, new air compressor, which saved up to 30% on the traditional running costs, and again, solar panels. And this company saved over 153 tonnes of carbon per year, which equates to 290,000 kilowatt hours of energy. So again, a massive saving on energy, but this business, like Sargensons, are seeing benefits of improving their reputation and kind of like brand image through embedding sustainability throughout the business. So I think that's everything. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of some of the businesses that we've helped.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's really interesting to hear about all the organisations that have gone through the programme and are benefiting now of going green, and what it means for, you know, the future as well, of how these sorts of businesses will survive and prosper and diversify into other markets. It's great. Thank you. Have we got any questions from the audience, both for Fred and for Sarah? We've got 5 minutes. We can do Q&A. Any questions? Everyone's really quiet today. There must be one question out there.
Yeah, can you hear me first of all?
Yes, we can.
Oh, right. Okay. It's both been very interesting perspectives by the speakers today, and the thing that I was drawn to was the backcasting, and I'm not going to say it's innovative, but I'm wondering how you can backcast and look realistically at things like pandemics. This is probably for Fred more than anybody else, but is it possible to actually look at backcasting and deal with pandemics or other very, very significant impacts in the world?
Thanks for this question. It's a really good point. Now, to give you an idea, I've just exposed a lot of my students to this idea, and I effectively forced them to do something exactly like that. I asked them to think about the year 2030 and project themselves into the future for a particularly or self-chosen company. And in the process of doing so, not only did they have to sort of describe a little bit what they thought the future might look like on the basis of a lot of reports that are already available, that we have a lot of sort of forecasting scenarios, lots of trend analysis, whether it's customers, whether it's on customer trends, whether it's on environmental trends. It could be any of those already available data sources, and there's some research institutes, think tanks and others that spend a lot of time and energy thinking about particular issues, risk, technology risks. You know, there's still a lot of uncertainty around nano materials, you know, things unknowns, so to speak, where we know that these could come up on our radar, but haven't really been quantified and qualified. And so, depending on which industry, there's a lot of information available that you could draw on and could say, to what extent is there a chance that these issues might become material or really affect us in a way that isn't currently on our radar? Now, that nobody knows. As I said, most of us can barely look ahead into the next few days. So this sort of long-term future projection is fraught with a lot of issues. But at the same time, I think what this backcasting is trying to get you to do is to detach yourself from the issues that we already know for now, and simply say, if I had almost free will and decide where I want to be in the long-term future, if you have a company that is suitable to that context, and say, maybe knowing what we do know, there is a way to visualize or describe what the future of our company should look like, and then think about the steps that we need to get there. Now obviously, as you say, the pandemic has really crossed a lot of paths, but it was not it was not unpredicted. There were lots of scientists who already told us years and years ago that sooner or later we might encounter a virus or bacteria that would create pandemics. And so these things are sort of these small trends, and I admit not everybody has enough time to follow all of these studies and to some extent doom predictors of doom, but it is important to pay attention to what might happen, and therefore also to be aware of some of the issues that could come up that are possible but where there's potential for them to occur in the coming decade. They could be political, geopolitical, there could be technological, and so on and so forth. But I think it's a combination of the two. Simply say, well, let's just leave it by the by. Let's just have a think about what's an ideal outcome. Where could we be if we had all choice in the world, and then think about how we get there. If nothing else, it's an interesting thought process before you have to get drawn back into the realities of the day-to-day work life.
Thank you. We have a question from Natalia. Natalia has got her hand up.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah. I just got a question for Sarah. It's really impressive the grants that you can give to businesses where you audit. But if we are looking at being a startup, is there help that can be given as a startup, or any other signposting you can give for being as green as possible, starting up from the get-go?
Yeah, so the grants are available if you've been trading for 12 months as a minimum, but we can offer support, so the audits, or signpost you to startup programs through the Coventry Warwickshire Growth Hub. So feel free to kind of leave your details and we can go from there.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Tomlins.
Hi, Denise.
Hi.
Thank you. Well, it's a comment. I'm not sure whether it would be helpful. It might confuse, but Fred, it was building on your reply to our colleague about backcasting. Just simply to say that, I mean, I tended to phrase it as theory of change in the past, and I think backcasting might be a bit more very much more business friendly, and to do that for the big picture stuff, and then to operationalize it through logic chains sat underneath. And so pandemic arrives and you want to keep that big vision, but your logic chains for how you're going to take those incremental steps to reach that can get adjusted. And then in business settings, I've tended to use risk and audit committees to underpin those logic chains, but work with risk and audit committees to see opportunities as well as risks. That's me. Coventry University, by the way, in terms of the advertising.
Thanks, Richard. You make a good point, and the way I like to think about these two things is that backcasting is looking from the future backwards, if you like, or towards the present, whereas theory of change, logic models allow you to start from the present and build towards that step in the sort of normal sequential manner, if you like. So they're complementary views and perspectives, if you like. You sometimes have to start in the future, or you have to start in the present to get to the future, but by backcasting you can create an alternative for yourself and work your way backwards. But terminology, it's complex stuff, so we don't need to go into that much detail. The other comment I was going to make is that on reporting side, for instance, the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures, is, for instance, going to ask companies to think about different scenarios for the future of the world. So specifically in the context of SDG 13 on climate action, you might ask yourself, okay, how are we going to operate in a world where carbon price is X? Well, how do we operate in a world as carbon price is Y? So you can already think about different scenarios, and this idea of anticipating different outcomes, different trajectories of the world in the years to come may be quite a good, useful way to stress test your own investments, your own plans for the future. And as someone pointed out, I think in the comments box, investors, but also others are increasingly asking for companies to report on the SDGs and particularly those types of issues.
Right. Thank you. I think that's all our questions. We better get moving on to the next presentation because we've only got 10-15 minutes left, so conscious I've got to whiz through my slides really quickly. But thank you to both our speakers, Sarah and Fred, for really informative presentations. Any further details, just email me at the Green Business Programme team, and I can put you in contact with our speakers and send you further information. So thank you both for that. So I'm just going to now share my screen with you. Hope everyone can see that. Yeah. Okay. So I won't go on to too much detail about the Green Business Programme, as Sarah's covered it, but obviously it's a grant funded programme out there. We're really keen to help SMEs and organisations in Coventry and Warwickshire to become more energy efficient. We help all SMEs in Coventry and Warwickshire, and to qualify for an SME, you have to employ fewer than 250 employees, have an annual turnover not exceeding 50 million euros, and be generating business to business more than 50% of your sales. Just quickly, some of our highlights. So during phase 2 of the programme to date, we've assisted 112 businesses. We're looking at saving 1,200 tonnes of CO2 emissions per year. And we've allocated 1.39 million in grant funding to date to support these businesses. Along the way, with the funding, it generates new jobs within the businesses, and we now have got 1,400 organisations who are part of our Green Business Network. Just focusing on the energy audit. So we did have to go remotely after with the COVID crisis. By doing that, we've successfully gone out to about 25 organisations now and advising them how the remote audits work. You can download our handy guide on how it can work for you as a business. Just focusing on SMEs really. So obviously the government's now forcing large businesses to make climate related disclosures. So currently SMEs don't have to, but if you operate within respective value chains of larger organisations, then it could have implications for winning work in the future. So just looking at those statistics, SMEs make up 51% of the UK economy and are generating 65% of UK emissions. So the time will come when they'll have to disclose their carbon emissions. Therefore, it's worth getting a free energy audit now and getting some top tips from the team on how you can make the journey for going green to be ahead of the game. The Green Business Network, it's free. Any organisation or individual can join it. We want to spread the word. We want to build the profile within the region. We run lots of events and workshops. Our next webinar is on the 9th of March around health, wellbeing and sustainable communities. And we are going to be running some more of these SDG webinars as well, and details will follow, and we'll make sure we'll share that all with you. We have a monthly newsletter. Being part of the network helps businesses as well to say they've got green credentials to secure new business. Can be part of our Green Business Directory. If you're supplying any green technology to businesses, you can go on the directory and we can signpost people to have a look at that. And what I've already said, we can signpost you to other grants within the Coventry City Council. We've got business support, innovation and skills for growth. Sarah mentioned at the start, we work very closely with Coventry University Enterprises, so they're one of the delivery partners on this programme, and they provide revenue grants up to £10,000 with a 40% intervention rate, and they're supporting the development of low carbon products and services. So if a company's got an idea for a new low carbon product or service, they'll IP it, they'll provide support to progress that innovation, do the testing and do the accreditations around it as well. Some examples there of where they've helped do that: software application developed for an app to enable carbon reduction by promoting car sharing is just one of the examples as well. And some of the team are on this webinar today, so we can make sure we share details with you. They also provide capital grants up to 20,000 with a 40% intervention rate, and this is supporting activities around equipment to manufacture new low carbon products, new green services as well around recycling and waste processing. And like us, they provide one-to-one advice and workshops on lots of different building techniques and technologies and other environmental solutions. Briefly, just on our business sustain team as well within Coventry City Council, that's another environmental service that's offered by us. It's a team of sustainability consultants. They're providing national businesses of all sizes, so not just SMEs, with environmental management assistance. So that's another service that we do have if you wanted to know more. We're currently looking a bit on our, now a bit about the climate change strategy. The council are currently in development of a new one. This is going to be much more ambitious than the last one. It's going to work for the whole city, and it's going to be based on the 17 SDGs as well. We're intending to establish an independent commission of stakeholders where we're going to mobilise the businesses in our area, communities, voluntary organisations across the city into developing this new climate change strategy and action plan. Some of the achievements we've had in 2020 that we've worked through COVID, and these are some of the things we've achieved during the year. We've obviously got our new online offering. We launched our remote energy audits. Our business sustain team developed an online environmental register as well. We've had new funding streams come in through the Green Business Programme and also through our other funding programmes. We've developed our Keeping Coventry Warm programme, so we've now got affordable warmth money that's been allocated and is currently supporting 45 properties as well. We have also started the research and analysis of our regional energy system operator to look at how we're going to decarbonise the city going forward, what new energy methods are going to be needed, and we're engaging with stakeholders on that. We continue to show our examples to leading on climate change by receiving A- score for the disclosure programme. So that's a global disclosure programme. So we're one of a few UK cities that have received that alongside lots of other worldwide cities. So we're going to carry on with adaptation and mitigation to make sure we're hitting those targets to continue receiving these awards. And something else as well, we became the first city council last year to become a corporate member of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and there's more to follow on that. So what's next going forward? We're looking at partnerships on how we can develop a major step change in energy infrastructure for the city. I've mentioned about the Climate Commission we're looking at setting up. We'll be continuing with these Green Talk Live webinars, and more are being planned for the rest of 2021. And we hope we'll be getting out there again at our face-to-face events before the year's out as well. There'll be the final design of the West Midlands Regional Energy System Operator project, which will look at new energy systems, including low carbon energy generation, storage and management. We've also subscribed to new software called Climate View, and this will help us plan, understand and visualise the shifts necessary to address the urgent climate crisis. And we'll continue as well to keep trying to win funding as well to support the sustainability agenda. We've got a few funding bids in the pipeline, and we hope we'll be successful in getting those so we can provide more advice and funding to help businesses go green and help with our region as well to reduce climate emissions. And like I've said, we're developing a new climate change strategy as well. Some of the other things we're reducing across the city, our Very Light Rail project, which will be the first one of its kind in the UK. So looking at the future of mobility, using battery technology to create a new system in Coventry. It's estimated to be built for testing sometime this year. So it's all in the project development stage at the moment. We've currently got 247 charge points, electric charge points throughout the city, with a further 206 by the end of March this year. When we have that outside of London, we will have the most EV chargers outside of London. So it's something that we're very proud of. We've also got our Try Before You Buy scheme that businesses can make an expression of interest for. So you could have an electric fleet within your business, and the only cost to you will be insurance costs. So if you want to find out more about that, do let us know. We've also got our plug-in Coventry scheme, where you can have plug-in charging points at your business, no charge to you. So that's something else that you can have a look at. And we've also applied for funding to become the first electric bus city as well, alongside Oxford. There'll be more to follow on that. We're also home of the National Vehicle Battery Testing Centre, which will be opening soon. So this will be, this is an innovative partnership between the council, the LEP and Warwick Manufacturing Group. So it's an open access research facility which supports the transition of the UK to become a world leader in the design, development and manufacture of batteries for vehicle electrification. And this has been built in Coventry. And then just the final slide. So when we entered a COVID world a year ago, we didn't know what to expect. The remote world of working has enabled us to look at good changes and opportunities we can make to effect change in a post-COVID world. More than ever, it has made us aware of the impacts upon the environment and sustainability. We have some successes with new ways of working and developing partnerships to enable us to make those changes around digital transformation, to manage air quality, for example. And with more people appreciating nature and green spaces more than ever at the moment, this gives us a real opportunity to promote active travel and how we use public transport in a post-COVID world. And we have the opportunity to change the way people use the city in the future, a place for people and not just cars. And obviously creating green spaces in the city so people want to live and socialise there. We'll also be pushing for funding for addressing fuel and food poverty and making homes more energy efficient. We're going to be obviously engaging with people about food growing, both local and organic, through our food networks, and engage with our communities to affect this change. So this is where we see where we'll be going. And there's our contact details for the Green Business Programme, and please follow us on Twitter and join our LinkedIn group because we post there daily innovative projects that we're involved in. So thank you. Okay, any questions? Okay. We've got last 5 minutes, we've got two speakers who are going to be talking about Green Week and Ingenuity programme. So can I invite David Chapman and Debbie to share their screens? You're both on mute, actually. I don't know.
No, that's fine. I'll be sharing up my screens. Just bear with me a second.
Okay.
Okay. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. I'll try and keep this as quick as possible, obviously, because we've run slightly over time. So my name's Debbie Smith, and I work for the University of Warwick, and I'm the Enterprise Development Officer. So thank you for inviting us along today, Denise. Really exciting to hear everything that's going on in Coventry and Warwickshire, and really great to be a part of that as well. So just wanted to talk a little bit about Ingenuity, which is a competition that is UK-wide, but we, Warwick University, are the regional hosts of this competition. So hopefully if people are interested in the SDGs and how you could potentially make a social, environmental, economic impact, this is a competition that will allow you to do that. It's for startups, it's for existing businesses. So if you've got ideas that you'd like to explore further that link in with the SDGs, or for example, if there's specific themes, which I'll go on to shortly, that entice you, then I'd really recommend getting involved. As you can see from this slide, there's a huge prize pot associated with it. So there's £400,000 up for grabs for the best ideas, which will split across the 4 different themes. And the whole purpose behind Ingenuity is to is to basically make an impact within the UK. So obviously with you attending this seminar today, you've got an interest in the SDGs, you've got an interest in what you could potentially achieve, and this is a perfect opportunity to dip into a business support programme to take your ideas forward. So there's 4 themes. One's creating prosperity, the other one's building community, improving health, and tackling climate change. So obviously dependent on kind of where your passions are and where your business is at the moment, you can tap into these different themes. Obviously I imagine for many it might be the climate change theme, but there are other themes here that may fit into kind of the direction of where you want to go as well. In terms of the programme itself, there are different ways to engage. So you can become an applicant and become a future founder, which, as you see here, you can develop a new idea. One thing to mention is that you don't need to have a pre-existing idea. So if you've got a passion for any of those areas, basically there'll be keynote speakers, mentors, one-to-one support and so on to take you through the whole idea generation and development process. And they'll help you explore your ideas, and then you'll be able to pitch and then hopefully win investment at the end of it. So it's an absolutely fantastic programme if you want to make a positive impact in the world. One thing I would say is the deadline's very soon, so it's this Sunday. There are a few activities associated with that, so give yourself a couple of hours to undertake those activities, but they're just more thought-provoking activities in terms of getting you to think about why you want to apply it and so on. But what I would do, I will put the link into the chat, and if anyone's got any questions, I'll put my email in the chat as well. But as I say, it's a fantastic opportunity to push forward with some ideas, especially if you're interested in the SDGs and making a social impact. I'll hand over to David Chapman now.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. So I'm getting some feedback from somewhere. As you've probably seen, I've already put something in the chat, but WRAP is running the Food Waste Action Week next week. University of Warwick are getting involved. We'll have a couple of talks, so feel free to share that with your staff members. Also, if you're in the food industry, something fantastic to get on board with and involved with. And then if I can have the next slide. And then the week after, we're running Green Week. From the 8th to the 14th. This is a collaboration between the 2 universities, Coventry City Council, Warwick District, Action 21 and the SUs, basically bringing together everybody, that's businesses, schools, community groups, organisations, individuals, all to do something around sustainability during the week. When we say sustainability, as this talk has been alluding to, we are talking the full kind of UN SDGs, so everything to do with sustainability. So if you'd like to get involved, then please do. You don't necessarily need to tell us. I've added the hashtags on the chat so you can share on social media what you're doing, but if you do want to kind of get in touch and know some more information, then contact sustainability@warwick.ac.uk. We will be running this as well at roughly the same time next year in March, so a very early heads up if you're wanting to be involved in that as well next year, please do. The Facebook and website are still being updated at the moment, in terms of we're constantly getting more and more events being added daily at the moment, so keep an eye on it.